At the recent Xbox and Bethesda showcase, we got to see some Redfall gameplay. We have talked about Redfall before on the channel, but now we have some new details to talk about. And as someone who finds vampires and blood magic in gaming really interesting, we've got to talk about this game again. Make sure to click like down below and subscribe to the channel if you want to show support, and comment what your favourite vampire game of all time is. I'm Paradise Central, so let's jump into it by talking about the developers. Arcane, the studio behind Deathloop, Dishonored and Prey, are the ones making this co-op vampire game. Their past games have been really good in their own right, and this studio has definitely built up trust among fans. For this reason, it makes sense that Redfall could actually be pretty good and fun to play when it finally releases, but we'll have to wait and see until we can play it ourselves to say for certain. Speaking of the game releasing, it's now set to come out in 2023. Furthermore, it will be on the Xbox consoles, PC for Steam and Epic, as well as the cloud. It's also an Xbox Game Pass title, and as I always say when we cover games that are coming out as part of the Xbox Game Pass, it's looking like a really good deal considering how many new games are being added and often as day one releases. In the new extended gameplay trailer, we got to see several of the characters and their unique abilities in action, as well as some of the open world and the enemy types that we'll be able to fight, so we've got a bit to talk about with some extra information from the Bethesda article about the game on their website. Within the article, they say it's a cooperative, story-driven FPS experience, plus everything Arcane fans have come to expect from the studio. An open world packed with mystery, a diverse roster of heroes to choose from, strategic combat that will keep you on your toes, painstakingly crafted environments, a rich narrative driving you through the world, a wide array of weapons and vampires, a lot of vampires, sneaky vampires that can grab you and separate you from your team, hulking vampires that are capable of tearing you and your team to pieces, and godlike vampires powerful enough to eclipse the sun. Furthermore, we know that there are currently 4 characters for you to choose to play. These include Layla Ellison, a biomedical engineering student who interned at a research facility where something went very wrong, leaving her with intense telekinetic abilities. I believe this character ties into how the vampires were created, as they were made from experiments that went wrong, and they obviously have telekinesis abilities themselves, so I think Layla ties into it somehow, and we'll probably learn more about that when we can play it and see what happens in the story. There's also Jacob Boyer, an ex-military sharpshooter turned private contractor. The strange happenings on Redfall have left Jacob with a mysterious vampiric eye and spectral raven that's never far from his side. There's also Remy De La Rosa, a brilliant combat engineer who spent her life on the front lines. With the help of her robot cohort, she's determined to help rescue Redfall's survivors. Then there's Devinder Crowsley, a cryptozoologist and aspiring inventor. Armed with weapons of his own creation, he's on a mission to prove himself. It was cool because in the gameplay we got to see each of these characters with a few of their abilities, and they do look quite interesting and have different playstyles. For example, Layla Ellison can run forwards with a purple telekinetic umbrella that protects her from enemy fire, or create a sort of jump pad for her teammates and herself. Meanwhile, Jacob Boyer, the sharpshooter, can go invisible. Devinder Crowsley has some kind of flash that seems to paralyze or petrify the vampires, so it does look like there's quite a different playstyle between each of these. Furthermore, with each character you can upgrade your hero's abilities and try out a variety of playstyles and loadouts. Although Redfall is a co-op game, the creative director Harvey Smith has explained a huge emphasis for Redfall has been the solo experience, in keeping with Arcane's passions. He goes on to say that Redfall is an open world game, but it can be soloed with any of the heroes. The pace becomes more exploratory, and you can use recon and stealth to gather info on encounters and avoid enemies or even get the drop on them. The Bethesda article goes on to state that playing solo will force you to solely rely on yourself, but forming a squad allows you to combine the strength of the other players and test out strategies that only become available when you're part of a team. In terms of the type of vampires you will be fighting, they aren't powerful beings that you want to befriend. They're predatory monsters that will prey on anyone, even the vulnerable, to become more powerful. They've pushed the water away from the island and even blocked out the sun to make the town of Redfall completely their own. They were created by science experiments gone wrong and have powerful psychic abilities. They also have their own hierarchy, with each next ranking vampire being more clever and more dangerous than the last. However, it's not just vampires that you'll be fighting. There's also cultists who are ready to die for the vampires in the hopes of becoming one. Remember, it's also an open world, but there is more to do than just the main missions of the game. The creative director, Ricardo Bear, explains that when not doing the main story missions, players can help Redfall by taking neighborhoods back from the vampires and the cultists who worship them. This means that much like any other open world game, there will be activities to go and do that may or may not make different areas of the map into safe zones, which is kind of cool to see. To me it sounds a little bit like how in Dying Light 2, you can clear an area of the map and then assign it to one of the different survivor groups. Now let's talk about your weapon options, because you can find them as you explore, and there's also a rarity system, as well as the ability to upgrade and build gear. The production director, Ben Horn, says, "We have loadout options that players already know and love, like rare shotguns and sniper rifles, all with randomized weapon traits to make each drop feel like one of an endless potential of combinations. In addition to that, some of our weapons are unique vampire hunting weapons, like the stake launcher or UV beam, that can be used tactically to eliminate the vampire threat. So in addition to different random weapons with random traits, there's also these special vampire hunting weapons that sound pretty cool. I imagine these will be somewhat like exotics or legendaries from other games. There's also an emphasis on being able to use stealth, but it's not a pure stealth game. They label it as a stealth-enabled shooter. They go on to say that the AI has simulated hearing and sight, and always leads to interesting dynamic gameplay moments, creeping up on an enemy, avoiding notice, using the right weapons and damage types, choosing when to use your crazy powers, knowing when to break off from combat and stake a vampire that's been petrified by UV light. All of this is part of Redfall's tactically expressive gameplay. So essentially they're designing the game in such a way that enables you to play the way you want. So you could play it with a focus on stealth, you could play it with a focus on using your abilities and going in guns blazing, with teaming up with your friends and synchronizing your shots to not aggro lots of different vampires. There's a lot of different options from the gameplay we've seen and from the info in the article that basically say the game is being designed for both solo and co-op, for open world in terms of exploring, doing activities, unlocking different regions, but also doing main story missions with a compelling narrative, playing different characters with different loadouts to choose from and abilities, as well as different vampire types that, as we mentioned before, will interact with you in different ways, pulling you away from the group, or a tank-like one that will take your whole group's focus to bring it down. So it sounds very, very interesting. I personally love open world games and vampire games, so I'm very excited to play this. But again, I will say we haven't played this yet. This is from the information, the trailers, the gameplay trailer that is out there, so we'll have to wait and see until we can jump in and play it ourselves, and then we'll let you guys know exactly what it's like once we've had the chance to do so. I'm really keen to hear what you guys have to say about this from all the information we've just shared, as well as the trailers that are already out there. Put in the comments down below and tell us what you think. Also, click like to support the channel and subscribe for all the other videos that we have already uploaded for you guys. There are also videos on screen now that we think will be perfect for you, so make sure to click them, check them out, and then tell us what you think in the comments down below.